If you've been kayaking long enough, then you've encountered just about every variety of river feature. I think by and large we have no precondition, but after actually encountering many of these features, we realize how disorienting they can be. Holes are probably the most feared and avoided feature on the river because of the level of disorientation they can cause. We discuss control in holes next for this very reason. It is a feature you will encounter whether you want to or not, and if you develop the skill set to understand and move around in them, the first inadvertent hole ride could potentially be less shocking. Not to mention, it's just stupid fun. Holes also add the nice touch of being able to roll back up and still be surfing. And we will discuss several ways to stay oriented and retentive to help make this happen. Everything we touched on in the 2 previous episodes greatly affects our success for what we cover with fundamentals in holes and waves. Primarily, how the design of the boat interacts with features, and the importance of positions of power and where we best apply those principles while surfing dynamically. This is certainly not as easy as it was on flat water, and if you were struggling with some of the basics on flat water, be sure to continue to practice and use those principles as your daily warm-up. The more focus you apply to fundamentals, the easier this next phase comes to you. Waves and holes both are similar in that they are surface unconformities caused by compression, displacement, and recirculation. The main difference, however, is that holes deal with compression downward with less downstream momentum, and waves deal with compression outward with more force moving downstream. Therefore, our boats play and interact with them differently. Why people gravitate towards waves first is they're generally less retentive, but they also struggle learning concepts because, well, waves are less retentive and paddlers don't spend as much time actually on the feature. Holes being more retentive give a stronger emphasis on positions of power, and feedback is immediate if you stray from those positions, whereas waves again let you get away with more. It's not that you should start with one over another, you just have to remember such feature characteristics while practicing. You have all varieties of holes in terms of shape and depth of recirculation. I recommend a fairly friendly hole to start, one that is retentive enough to hold you well right side up and upside down if you were to roll quickly, but not so retentive where it will hold you upside down for long. In its most basic form, a hole can be broken down into a pit or foam pile, the corners or shoulders, and the seam line where the green water meets the foam. The foam pile is generally in the center and has an area of recirculation as well as an area of downstream flow. The break between the two is the boil line. The corners or shoulders are where the hole starts to fade away and the recirculation becomes shallower and weaker or non-existent at all. The seam line is where the actual displacement of water starts and is the root of the recirculation. What's important to know is that the pile holds onto you due to the buoyancy of your boat, and on the shoulders you will need to be more conscious of staying on the feature, unless of course the hole has very steep, retentive shoulders. When surfing in the hole, your boat shape and the shape of the hole naturally want to become parallel to one another due to the buoyancy of the boat. Almost inadvertently, you have just learned your first hole maneuver, the side surf. If the hole has shape or depth to it, your boat will work along its length staying parallel to the shape unless a great deal of force is applied to overcome this happy equilibrium, happy being relative. So, the easiest way to catch a hole can be simply to drop into it sideways as the retentive qualities will grab the buoyancy of your boat and initiate the surf. The goal is to minimize downstream momentum so as not to punch through if the feature is weak. Another option is to ferry onto the shoulder of the hole and take a backstroke to initiate the side surf once on the feature. Once you learn to catch a hole, which is easier than it sounds, the hardest part will come next. Staying balanced and then moving around. This takes us back to an important lesson from earlier, which was our power imbalance. Ideally, when side surfing, we keep our upstream edge lifted to avoid the exceptionally quick upstream flip. Using our edging drills from earlier, this will help us maintain balance without use of the paddle, or at least enough to where we can use the paddle for more than a brace. The brace will ultimately fail us anyhow, as it will never provide enough flotation or surface tension to keep our body above the water. And more likely, it will actually aid in flipping us over downstream as it deteriorates into more of a hanging draw. If, however, you feel at ill ease to immediately sit up and practice edging drills, there is a simpler way to ease into this, which I will call our "oh crap" position. This is a great catchphrase to remind us of where to go if you're literally saying "oh crap." When side surfing and holding an edge, it will feel natural to a fault to rely on a high brace, which will inadvertently move us further and further back towards our back deck and out of a position of power. Unfortunately, this can be an unsafe place if you do not know how to roll up from this position. The opposite direction, forwards, feels less natural, but is far more stable and protected. With your paddle low, even resting on your cockpit rim, elbows tight and wrists rolling back and forth to gain purchase on the foam pile for stability, we are now in a powerful, safe position. One other great little caveat to this is if we catch an edge and remain in this position, there is a good chance our body and one of our blades will high side on the foam pile, only requiring a light hip snap to right ourselves back up. Now that we have established a side surf, we are starting to achieve some ease, and maybe, just maybe, all of those window shades we have now experienced have resulted in a quick roll right back into a surf. Our next step for a natural progression will be to start moving forward and backwards in the hole. Using your paddle and using low, wide, sweeping strokes will help to not only move you forward or backward, but also offers a great deal of stability. It is very important to realize that when you are taking those wide strokes, that you are actually making the boat move and slightly turning into the green water coming from upstream. This helps engage the edge and allows it to make small carves to help you track in the direction you desire. More natural and powerful for our body, but yet again counterintuitive, moving backwards using low back sweeps will be the easiest method to start. We have more range of motion twisting backwards with our torso as opposed to twisting forward to reach for our forward sweep. This also allows us to keep the paddle blade in the water, giving us additional stability. It will be natural to want to paddle forward out of the hole as opposed to backward. Another option is using a technique called a green bow rudder, which requires keeping the boat on a fairly consistent edge and taking your downstream paddle blade and reaching deep below the foam pile, offset from the bow. Here you can feel the water exiting from the hydraulic below the foam pile. By feathering your paddle, you can feel where the paddle gains purchase and begins to pull you in the direction of the rudder. What is important to maintain here is the idea of keeping your shoulders square with the paddle and the paddle relatively low in angle, a position of power. Once you find the sweet spot for the bow rudder, you can hold the paddle stationary and only adjust as necessary. A common problem that can occur is a high brace that in turn creates more instability and can actually cause you to flip over downstream. This takes some time to play with and master, but once you have a feel for it, you can't ever imagine how you live without it. By the time you start moving around, you will have already begun to discover our next maneuver for mobility, the spin. Spins can occur in many different fashions in a hole, but most commonly at the corners or shoulders of the hydraulic. Other places it can occur are weak spots or seams in a hydraulic, though a bit touchier as they aren't as uniform as the corners. When moving forward or backward in a hole, you will work either the bow or stern to the corner, while the remaining portion of the boat still is making retentive contact with the feature. The boat will actually begin to lift on the leading bow or stern and turn your boat perpendicular to the feature. This alone is a great way to work yourself into a front surf and carve and rudder your way to the back of the feature, but more on that later. The important aspect to remember when keeping the spin going is to keep the paddle active on the downstream side to keep the motion going. Notice here, the paddler moves the boat to the corner, the spin begins, and he switches the blade in the direction of the force to keep the spin moving. Also, notice the paddler uses an edge transition after the first 90 degrees of rotation to help keep the spin moving and to help avoid catching the edge in the green water. As you begin to practice this technique, you will notice the amount of edge, the required catch with the paddle, and the ease of spinning is affected by how far out on the corner you pull yourself before the spin is initiated. Be careful though, as it is just as easy to pull yourself directly off the feature or not out far enough and purl the stern. This skill takes a great deal of focus and finesse to become proficient, and one additional tool can help you succeed. If you have worked on this previously, you may have heard the adage of keeping your eyes upstream. And if you keep your eyes upstream while you rotate through the spin, it will help make your boat spin. Yes, turning your head causes your body to turn, but that alone does not cause the boat to turn. Rotating your body and planting the correct stroke in the foam pile will cause the boat to rotate as we now have a means to transfer potential energy through our wind-up. Moreover, I think the idea of keeping your eyes upstream truly helps your vision and reference of where you are relative to the feature. With additional information, we gain balance and important details in our timing for executing the spin. As the spin is initiated and our boat points downstream, we switch the active blade, the direction of the force with that blade, and transition the edge to the opposite side. It is also at this moment our head rotates back around to the spot where we are going. The eyes upstream rule is the perfect reference for crucial timing. We will discuss in advanced hole maneuvers why this foundation is so critical for advanced moves. But first, we will discuss the fundamentals for waves, as there are some overlapping concepts for both waves and holes.